Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Military Money Manual Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer, and today we're going to discuss maximizing your deployment finances.
And I'm Jamie, and we just want to give a quick disclaimer that obviously deployments can vary greatly of what it means. You could be in an isolated FOB in Afghanistan, well, hopefully not in Afghanistan anymore, or you could be on a Cush, almost TDY to Bahrain. So we want to give general guidelines and tips that may not work for your specific deployment, but hopefully there's going to be some things you can take away and make progress on your personal finance journey. Deployment really can be one of the most financially beneficial times of your military career.
On deployment, you have almost a unique opportunity, other than possibly offshore oil platform workers, to drop your expenses to almost zero and increase your income simultaneously. So for myself personally, I did 3 deployments over my 12-year military career. First one was to Kyrgyzstan. We were at Manas Air Base flying missions into Afghanistan. I've also been to Qatar and to Oman as well. And then I had a pretty awesome opportunity. I struggled to even call it a deployment. It was really a 2-year PCS, but it was to a tax-free area. So a lot of the same financial considerations that you have on deployment also applied while I was in a tax-free area. And I got to live in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi for 2 years. And that was pretty awesome because while I wasn't able to drop my expenses to zero, I was able to really enjoy the experience out there. And I got 2 years, almost 26 months of tax-free income. So Jamie, I had 3 deployments, Kyrgyzstan, Qatar, and Oman. How about yourself?
So I had 4 over 10 years of active flying time during my more than 12 years in the military so far. 4 deployments between Kuwait and Romania. Plus literally hundreds of TDYs and overseas missions during that period. One of the nice things that's kind of unique for aircrew or anyone else that gets experience to do short kind of stopovers or flights over a combat zone tax exclusion area where you get tax repay is even a 1-day stop in Bagram or somewhere where you can earn tax free can give you a lot of the same advantages that we'll talk about on deployments. That's kind of my experience there.
Yeah. It's, I know for myself, there's a few deployments I had where I was probably in some real danger, but I definitely don't want to make it seem like I'm this combat hardened veteran when, there's our Army and Marine and Air Force and Navy brethren out there who have actually been on very serious deployments with a lot of stuff happening. So like we said in the beginning of the episode, your experience is definitely going to vary on deployment, but for a lot of people, you can take a lot of these principles and apply them to whatever situation you're in. And I would say for most deployments, you are able to really minimize your expenses and increase your income. And like we were talking about before the episode started, Jamie, that's really all there is to financial or personal finance, right? And achieving financial independence is minimize your expenses and increase your income and then invest the difference between those two.
Yeah. And if you play it right, your deployment could accelerate your journey towards financial independence by a huge percentage. You may even be able to double your net worth during a deployment or pay off all your debt during a deployment. And that progress in the 3, 6, 12, 15 months you're deployed is going to pay huge dividends over probably the next 50 years of your life if you just kind of come up with a plan, do a little bit of research before you go, and have a little bit of discipline to do what you need to do to meet your goals. And that's really what it's all about, is accelerating your journey towards financial independence.
I'd like to start with talking about decreasing your expenses, and then we can talk about increasing your income while you're on deployment. And then Jamie will talk about some of the unique investment opportunities that are available to you while you're deployed. So let's get into decreasing your expenses. I'll take, we've got a list here of about 8 or 9 ideas. I'll take the first couple, Jamie, and then you can take the next few. But
all right,
starting with suspending your cell phone service. So have you ever done this when you were deployed?
I didn't personally because we were always I was always on a plan with my wife or something. And then especially when the days of T-Mobile came around with international plans, I definitely wanted that service overseas. But I have plenty of friends, especially I think AT&T is the really good carrier if you're with for deployment benefits are huge. So I haven't personally.
I think I did it in my first deployment, but every deployment since then, I've either had T-Mobile, which, in case you didn't know, has a great military discount, a great military plan, and they also offer overseas data just included in the price of your contract. And then Google Fi is the other one I want to mention, is just absolutely fantastic. And now they're doing digital SIM cards. So if you have a Android or iPhone model that was produced, I think in the last like 2 or 3 years or more recently, you're able to add that service to your phone without even getting the physical SIM card, and you can swap between whatever provider you're using in Google Fi. And I know for myself, when I go TDY or if I deploy, as soon as I land anywhere in the world, I take my phone off of airplane mode, and I'm immediately connected with full LTE high speed data. And then texts and calls, I think, are only texting is free, and then calls are only 20 cents a minute. So I'm a big fan of Google Fi. Have reliable Wi-Fi wherever you're going. Then you might want to look into possibly suspending your cell phone service. And all the all the cell phone companies will do this for military service members. I think up to 36 months, and you can also suspend the payments on your phone as well. For a lot of those cell phone companies, a lot of those
Yeah, I've even
cell
had
phone
friends
providers.
who, specifically with AT&T, had friends who AT&T paid off the remainder of their device payment plan when they submitted their deployment orders. So I can't guarantee it's going to work for everyone, but I have a handful, more than one or two, of people who that's worked out for. So there's definitely some benefits there to calling your cell phone provider and seeing if there's an opportunity to save some money there.
Okay, the other decreasing your expenses ideas I'll talk about here are putting your utilities into vacation mode. I'm trying to remember which deployment I did this on. I think it was my first one where I wasn't using the internet and we didn't have anybody in my house. So I just called up my internet service provider and said, "Hey, I'm going to be out of state for 3 months." And I think they dropped the monthly price down to like $1 or something, just to kind of keep it active in the background. And then the other one was suspending your auto insurance. So again, Geico, USAA, uh, Allstate, any of the major auto insurance providers, you just tell them, "Hey, I'm going overseas. Here are my deployment orders, and I'm going to be storing my car at this address. And as long as nobody's using it, then you can suspend your auto insurance." And for USAA, actually, when I went overseas for 2 years, they have a special overseas military coverage. And I think it was very cheap. I think it was only $30 a year, and it allows you to keep building your USAA membership continuity. So you get several, you keep adding years to your membership, which pays or increases your USA membership dividend that gets paid out annually. And it also allows you, when you rent a car overseas, you're still covered by your USA insurance, but it's only $30 a year. So once you, like for myself, I have Chase Sapphire Reserve and Amex Platinum. I usually use the Chase Sapphire Reserve for rental cars because it has primary rental car insurance. And then on top of that, with the USAA $30 a year, I've also got auto insurance through USAA to cover me as well. So you can save, depending on especially if you're younger, under the age of 25, usually your auto insurance rates are much higher. Suspending your auto insurance when you are deployed overseas can be a great way to save money. So while you're deployed, you could go on a spending freeze and essentially drop all of your expenses to zero. Now, if you've suspended your cell phone service like we talked about, or if you're, maybe you keep it active because you want to stay in touch with people, I think that's a great way to do it. But if you've got your other utilities in vacation mode, you suspended your auto insurance, while you're deployed, you're getting all of your lodging paid for, you're getting all of your food paid for. You really don't have, gym membership is free. There's really nothing to spend money on when you're deployed. I don't know about you, Jamie, but I mean, occasionally I would order some stuff from Amazon just to like have a package to look forward to. But when I
Because you didn't have
was,
any friends,
because
or
I didn't have any friends, nobody sent me care packages. All right, it's a sore subject. But what about you, Jamie? Did you find, besides, I mean, you, when on your deployments, I'm guessing you had the wife and possibly a kid or two back home. So obviously they couldn't stop spending money. But did you notice that your own personal expenditures dropped significantly while you're deployed?
For sure. Because I'm the spender of the relationship, even our, eating out costs and grocery costs, stuff like that went down, clothing. I did still spend a little bit, these quote unquote deployments that we were talking about, where I still went to the BX and did a shelf check, and I would buy random crap. Or there's one like shawarma place in Kuwait where we would go a couple times throughout the deployment, buy Chinese food or shawarmas, or bounce back and forth for like, the halfway point or almost time to go home kind of thing. I remember one time it was the other side of in Kuwait, there was a McDonald's. And so we like loaded up in a van and like drove to McDonald's one day. And I don't remember why, but we were still spending a little bit, but we were able to significantly cut costs for sure.
I see a lot of people when they're on deployment, they're going to the BX, a couple times a week. They're shopping online a lot. Maybe they're spending a lot on video games and stuff. And that's great if you're using that to entertain yourself. But if you're just kind of like, if it's unconscious spending, if it's just kind of mindless, then I think it's, there's definitely other things. If you want to, if you have the time, if you have the resources, you can download some Kindle ebooks, or you can listen to some podcasts. There's a lot of things that you could spend your time doing that are going to make you a lot wealthier and richer than, spending money at the BX on whatever crap they have on the shelf.
Yeah, for sure. Or just be healthier. Exercising, eating well, stuff like that can go a long way too, depending on where you're deployed. So there's a lot of things you can do other than just wasting time spending money mindlessly, like you said. But really, just imagine if you had a savings rate while you're deployed. If you're single, your savings rate easily should be 95% or around there on a deployment. If you're married, you might be able to still hit 70 or 50%. If you're married with kids, maybe you're closer to 50% to 30%, or depending on where you're starting at. But there are some definite goals you can make if you are just intentional with it, and use this as an opportunity to really accelerate your financial independence journey, or to get out of debt if you're still in debt.
Okay, so those are some good tactical tips for people to apply, whether they're in the middle of their deployment or about to go on another deployment. JB, are there any other ideas that we have for people in terms of reducing your expenses?
Yeah, one other common one you'll see, especially for younger single types, is you may even break your lease, which you're allowed to do under protections of law when you're presented military orders. You could give your military orders to your landlord and get out of your lease. So let's say you're in downtown Seattle and you have a apartment or a condo that you're renting, and you could then bank your BH. You pay a small fee for moving your stuff into storage and then storing it in a storage facility. And maybe, you sleep on a friend's couch or something like that for a couple of weeks during your pre-deployment training, or during your R&R or whatever it is, when you get back, and then you just move right back into a new apartment. So there's a little bit of turmoil and a little bit of pain potentially of moving your stuff, storing it, things like that. But you're allowed to break your lease, and then you can take that BH, like I said, and just bank it towards your financial goals. Another idea, which you, Spencer, actually did, is you guys rented out your place on Airbnb during one deployment, right?
Yeah, that's right. We had a condo in Tacoma, Washington when I was stationed at McCord Air Force Base. And that was actually one of the most financially beneficial things that we did, was rent out the place. So the first deployment, we rented it out, and we had a minimum rental period of 2 weeks. Or might have, yeah, I think it was 2 weeks. And so the problem there is we hadn't really set up a system to have someone turn it over for the next guest. And we ended up just relying on our friends, and it was good. We made, I think, a couple $1,000 over the 2 or 3 month deployment that I was on, but there was a little bit of turmoil with turning over the condo from one guest to another. And then by the third deployment, we were happy to rent out the place, but we didn't want to deal with any of the turnover stuff. So what we said was it was a 1 month minimum lease, and we ended up getting a couple in there, and they rented the place for the whole deployment when I was gone. And
Oh,
we ended up
wow.
making, I think we ended up making 3 times our mortgage payment per month. So it was actually, we
Wow.
paid off 6 months of our mortgage and just 2 months of renting the place out. So yeah, short-term rentals are, I
That's
mean,
awesome.
yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do with short-term rentals, a lot of money making potential there. But we found that, and check with your homeowners association, or if you're in a condo, there might be some rules and regulations you have to do if you're going to short-term lease out your place. But usually, as long as it's a minimum of 30 days and you own the place, sometimes even landlords will let you sublet. So if you have a buddy who's coming into a new duty station or is about to PCS and they want to move in, save some money somewhere, then you might want to look into subletting your place and basically having your rent or mortgage covered, and then you get to bank the BAH while you're deployed.
Yeah, that'd be great. The other way, in addition to decreasing your expenses, the other way you can benefit financially from a deployment is by increasing your income. The best way to do that is some of the special advantages we have for deployment. One of the big ones is CZTE. We'll call it tax-free pay, but combat zone tax exclusion is really just where they don't take federal taxes. I don't pay state taxes. I'm a Florida resident. I believe most states, or if not all of them, wouldn't charge state tax. Is that true?
I believe that's correct. I think if you're getting the federal month tax free, I think most states also give you that month tax free as well. But I was lucky enough to become a resident of Texas when I was in my first training duty station. So I haven't paid
Yeah, so
state taxes in 12 years.
same. Neither of us had to deal with that. No, we went to school in Florida, so we've been Florida residents our entire adult life for my wife and I. But tax-free pay is great. So basically, to summarize that at the most basic level is if your take-home pay from the military is $80,000 a year and all of it is earned tax-free, then to the IRS you earned $0 from working for the military during that year, which means you have no tax burden. Now, if you have investments or anything else where you're earning income, a side hustle, you may still have taxes from that, but from your pay, it's tax free. And so you will either get a fat check back, in April from the previous year, or the best part is you get paid more each year once you're on deployment and they say you're deployed, then they stop taking taxes out. And that's where it really, really is great. So tax free is a huge benefit that's unique to being in certain locations. And like we said, the proper term is CZTE. And those tax-free locations are primarily in the Middle East, but there's a few random gotchas. And when you're in that area, even for 1 minute of the month, you earn that entire month's pay tax-free.
Yeah, one thing to know is that the exclusion is limited for officers up to the highest E9 bracket, I think.
Yeah,
So
so
I
the
can't
chief
remember.
master sergeant of the Air Force pay.
Yeah.
So I looked at that this year with a pay increase and some other special pays. And you're tax free. You may not get all of it if you're making probably O4 level or O5 level for sure. It won't be 100% tax free up to that max cap of chief master sergeant of the Air Force level, the E9 senior enlisted for the service E9 pay.
Yeah. So like Jimmy was saying, I think you usually don't have to worry about it until you're kind of getting on in the years as a major or lieutenant colonel. And then you're still going to get a lot of your pay tax free. It's just that you'll might have to pay federal taxes on a little bit of your pay. And then you'll also note that when you look at your LES, if you get a tax free month, you are still on the hook for Medicare taxes and Social Security taxes as well. So it's only the federal income tax that is actually not taken from your paycheck when you're in a combat zone tax exclusion area. And the easiest way to figure out, am I in a tax exclusion area, is just Google CZTE, that's Charlie Zulu Tango Echo IRS. And they have a great website there, and they lay it all out. And note that it's not determined by the IRS. CCT areas are dictated by either congressional action or executive order. Don't go blaming the IRS if you're not getting tax-free pay for being, even though you're deployed to a combat zone. I would say that in general, most of the classic areas are, the Persian Gulf. But it's kind of funny because you could be in Bahrain or in the United Arab Emirates, essentially on vacation in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, and you're still getting the same tax-free benefits that someone deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan is.
Right.
So,
As far as tax-free goes, it's the same, but that's kind of a good segue into one of the other special pays is hazardous duty pay. And that kind of comes up depending on where you are and the danger of that area. So hazardous duty pay is another opportunity to increase your income. Anything on that one?
no, I can't remember. I think I've received hazardous duty pay for a couple of locations. I know I've received hardship duty location. I think that one was about $150. Hazardous duty pay, I can't remember. It's a couple $100. And then the other one that you'll get depending on your location or depending on if you see action. So for instance, if you're in an aircraft and you're engaged by enemy ground fire or a missile or something, you might see hostile fire / imminent danger pay, and you'll see that on your LES as IDP, imminent danger pay. And I think that one's only $225 a month right now.
So the imminent danger pay is per day in the combat zone. I think it's $750 a day, if I remember correctly. And this is a recent change, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So hostile fire pay, if you are, like you said, Spencer, if you're engaged, you're shot at, your fob is attacked, mortar attacked, then you get hostile fire pay for the entire month, which I believe is $225. If you're not, but you're in an area where you're in imminent danger, like say you're in Afghanistan, but you're not actually engaged, then it's just $750, I believe, per day. So those two kind of go hand in hand, depending on the danger and the threat of the area that you're at.
Yeah, one of the other pays that a lot of people can kind of forget about, especially if you're on a TDY, is family separation pay. So once I think it kicks in, is it 30 days separated
30
from?
days.
Yeah, yep, 30 days. And that's something that, people can lose track of. They might go on a TDY that's supposed to be only 3 weeks long and it ends up being 5 weeks long. They get back, they file their DTS voucher and they go about their life. Well, that's, if you don't follow up with finance and say, hey, I was gone for this amount of time, then you'll never see that pay. So usually on a deployment, they have kind of just a script and they'll run through it and they'll make sure that you get your family separation pay. And I think for most of my deployments, I actually didn't receive it while I was deployed. I just filed for it when I got back and then got it in a lump sum. Was that your experience?
I'm a little more aggressive spreadsheet keeper, maintainer. So I was like day 31, I had a reminder on my phone to go set up my STP and start family separation pay. I'm all
Nice.
about, every day that the government pays me what I'm entitled to is another day I can apply that towards, debt or financial independence. For most of my deployments, at least the first, I guess maybe two I was in debt and 2 I was out of debt off the top of my head, I believe. So every day you can try to go to, if you're at a base that has a deployed finance, Kuwait, Bagram, Baghdad, all these places that won't even be around in a couple years, probably, hopefully not, IUD, and you have a finance office, then take advantage of that. If you're stuck on a ship, I'm not sure exactly what they have on there, but I'm sure there's a way to file stuff like that. I would highly recommend trying to do it the day you're eligible versus waiting to the end of your deployment. It just gives you more money to use towards your goals in the middle of it. Another interesting note about family separation is actually allowance. So Spencer, can you describe a little bit of the difference between an allowance? If something is imminent danger pay and it ends in the word pay, what's the difference between that and family separation allowance or BAH, BAS that are both or any of the other allowances?
Right. The biggest difference is just how they're taxed. So any pay is going to be subject to federal income tax, and then any allowance is not. So
Is not. Yeah.
That's
one of the big benefits about our BAH is that's not taxed. And so what you're actually feeling you're getting paid in the military is a lot lower than what the IRS is billing you for tax purposes. Family separation allowance is currently $250 a month. So it's not a ton, but depending on your pay grade, that could be a nice little chunk of change to throw towards your goals for sure.
So now that you've decreased your expenses and you understand how you're going to increase your income, the other thing we didn't mention as well is depending on your location, you might be receiving per diem as well. So for most of the combat zone tax exclusion areas, I think there's a clause or provision that reduces your per diem to $3.50 a day. But after a 100-day deployment, well, you can take your wife or husband out for a nice dinner for the $350 you earned. But some locations, it can be substantial, depending, especially if there's no dining hall available and you have to procure your meals out on the economy. So now that we've decreased our expenses, we've increased our income, let's talk about some of the unique investment opportunities that are available while you're deployed. So one thing you mentioned earlier, Jamie, was the SDP. Do you want to walk us through what the savings deposit program is?
So the SDP is a great opportunity to get a guaranteed investment. And this may sound like a scammy thing, but this isn't like investing in Jamie or Spencer. It's a federal government program called the Savings Deposit Program. And if you call right now, the first 100 callers from this podcast, just kidding. No, it's available to anyone that's deployed, and you can open it after 30 days of deployed. You can open your SDP. And what it gives you is you can do up to $10,000, right? Guaranteed 10% annual return. And you can keep it open while you're deployed, and then up to 3 months after you return from your deployment. So if you are in a position where you're debt free or you have some extra money available, using the SDP while you're deployed is an excellent way to get 10% return with literally no risk, because it's backed by the federal government as a benefit for your deployment.
One thing I always did when I went on deployment was I made sure that before I went, I built up my emergency fund to at least $10,000. And then I had that money available to throw into the SDP. Now, unfortunately, recently they've changed the rules substantially. So you have to be in the combat zone for 30 days, I believe, before they even start counting your pay. So, and then you can only contribute pay that's not allocated. So for instance, if you put $1,500 a month into your TSP, that's deducted from your pay available to contribute to the SDP. You can still deposit through a couple of years ago, they were using the Eagle Cash card. I'm not sure if they're still using that, but and when I first got in, we were just writing checks because it was, the 1820s and Abraham Lincoln was still president. But the SDP it's a fantastic opportunity, 10% guaranteed return. And if you throw the full $10,000 in there, you can essentially earn a risk-free $1,000 per year off your $10,000 investment. So like I said, I always made sure that my emergency fund was topped up to $10,000, and then I threw my entire emergency fund into the SDP, and then I try to keep it in there as long as possible. So once you leave the combat zone, the SDP will remain open for 120 days after you depart the combat zone. And if you're lucky or unlucky enough to be redeployed to a combat zone during that 120 days, it resets your clock and allows you to continue to keep the SDP open. Interesting side note, one time I hit the tax-free zone during the 120 days, but somehow, the paperwork didn't get through finance, didn't get to DFAS, and they ended up paying me, they saw that I hit 120 days since my last tax-free zone, and they sent all the money to me. I sent them an email and said, "Oh, there's been a mistake. Like, I was in a tax-free zone on this day," and it was a pretty funny correspondence, because they essentially said, "Well, it's too hard to open the account back up, so I'm just going to credit your account $250 of interest."
I think it's
then,
it's only 90 days after deployment. I'm looking it up now,
days.
but
Okay.
I think it's 90 days.
Yep.
But yeah, and another way you can be eligible for the SDP, this is kind of a unique one, probably only for maybe someone on sea duty or for air crew maybe, but if you have 1 day in each of the 3 consecutive months, you can also participate in the program. So if you're a young crew member who's going TDY a lot and hitting tax-free zones, you 3 months in a row of tax-free, and you can open the SDP and keep it open by continuing to get a tax-free at least once every 90 days before it closes. And then it continues to stay open. Another concern some people have when you're talking about a lump sum of 10,000, you can't quite open it initially with 10,000. They have limits on how much you can contribute. Like you mentioned, Spencer, I think it's no more than your base pay per month. Are you familiar with that? I'm going to try to look it up if not.
Yeah, that's right. So you can contribute, as like I was saying, your base pay minus any allocations that you have. So if you have money going into the TSP, they deduct that money. So if you, let's say your base pay is $5,000 a month and you're contributing $1,500 to the TSP, then they'll say, okay, you have $3,500 available to contribute to the SDP. So if you were deployed for 3 months, then 3,500 times 3 is 11,500, and then you'd be by the end of month 3, you would be able to contribute the final amount into the SDP up to the $10,000 limit. Another thing to note is the 10% interest is only paid up to $10,000. So even if you leave money in there, it just continues to grow 10% on the 10,000. So that happened to me when I opened up my SDP when I was deployed, PCS to Abu Dhabi, and I had my SDP running for 2 years out there with $10,000 in it. And every year I just made an extra $1,000. So it didn't continue to compound once you hit that $10,000 limit.
That's interesting. That's kind of a unique situation, I guess. Most people probably don't get. That's unique. And one other note I just found is the SDP. A reminder, I did know this at some point, but the interest compounds monthly and is paid quarterly. So you can divide 10 by 12 and figure out your gains. So that's kind of how the SDP works. Definitely great benefit. Definitely something to take advantage of. Just knowing that you got to be a little bit patient with getting it up and running, and then pay attention to trying to keep it updated and keeping it active once you're there. What I started to say earlier about a concern people have about dropping in 10,000 is locking that money up should an emergency arise, and you are able to take money out should something happen, like a family emergency or something like that. You just need your commander's approval. So during my deployment, I've seen people have to pull money out in a family emergency kind of situation, and it was like the first 04 in the chain that was designated as a commander was able to sign that paperwork for them, and it was not a big deal to take out what they had deposited into there. But hopefully you're in a situation where $10,000 being locked up for the duration of your deployment isn't going to be a make or break kind of deal. So that's a lot about the SDP. You have anything else to add, Spencer?
The only other thing I'll add about that is maybe it's because I was in 03. I'm not sure, but I was actually able to request the money. One time I needed the money a little bit earlier out of my SDP than when it automatically withdraws and deposits to your bank account. And the other thing to note there too is when the money automatically withdraws and deposits to your bank account, it just goes to the same direct deposit that you have on file with MyPay. So you just have to make sure that you're getting your monthly paycheck, and then the SDP will go to that same account. But I think I was able to go on to MyPay and request the withdrawal, and it was automatically approved, and I had the money within 3 days. So I might have already left the combat zone at that point.
Yeah, if you're that checks. If your deployment is over, you can withdraw on your own. If it's during the deployment, that's when the commander endorsement's needed. But a lot of goodness there. Definitely something to research. Another great investment opportunity is your ability to invest in Roth retirement accounts, Roth IRA, Roth Tsp. Basically, everything Roth is kind of a good rule of thumb when you're getting ready to deploy. Why would we recommend Roth as a deployment benefit or strategy, I guess?
Roth accounts open up the triple tax benefit of military deployments for military service members. So when you're deployed, right, like we were talking about, you get your CZTE, your Combat Zone Tax Exclusion Pay, and you're not paying federal taxes on that money. And what Roth accounts allow you to do is contribute funds to the account, and the money grows tax-free. And then when you get after age 59 and a half, you can pull the money out of your Roth IRA or Roth TSP account. And again, you don't pay taxes on it. So let's review. You earned the money tax-free, it grew tax-free, and after age 59 and a half in retirement, you can pull the money out tax-free. So you never paid money on that tax, or you never paid taxes on that money.
In 40
Hopefully,
years or so,
and
you
40,
know?
yeah, exactly. Hopefully, if you're smart about it, you've put this money into, let's say you went on deployment, you're 25 years old, and you put $6,000 into your Roth IRA. And you put it into, just a traditional Vanguard index fund, total stock market index fund. It grows at 7% a year. And now at age 65, you go to pull that money out, and it's doubled, let's see, 4 times. So that'd be 6, 12, 24, 48. It's going to be over $48,000 of cash sitting there. And you are going to be able to pull all that money out tax-free. And you never paid taxes on it when you earn the money. It just sat in there, and you never had to pay taxes on the dividends. Well, it grew in your Roth IRA. And now in retirement, you get to pull it out tax-free. So this is really a very unique military benefit. If you go and talk to a CPA or a tax advisor or a financial advisor, make sure you ask them the question about how would you contribute combat zone tax exclusion pay, or how would you invest your combat zone tax exclusion pay? And if they can't answer that question, or if they don't realize that money is untaxed, it can go into your account and grow untaxed, and then you can get it back in retirement untaxed. If they don't realize that you have that benefit, then maybe you should look at using a different financial advisor or CPA, or just, show it to them and explain it, how it works to them. And if they get it right away and they realize like, wow, you have a very unique opportunity here, because, 40 years of contributions to a Roth IRA, if you maxed out $5,000 to $6,000 a year into your Roth IRA invested in a very low cost Vanguard index fund, you'll have over $1 million in a Roth IRA by the time you retire.
Yeah, we've had a similar experience with CPAs and investment guys before. Typically, when we show them, especially with spouse taxes, is a very challenging situation to try to convince them of. You really need, any time a spouse goes for a new job, whenever you PCS, you have to reteach that company's HR department about those tax laws. For example, for us, like I said, we're Florida residents. And it's 100% legitimate to claim Florida residence because that's where we commission from. We entered active duty in Florida, or for you being stationed in Texas in the past, 100% legitimate, not shady at all. And so we're taking advantage of the opportunity to be Florida residents, but for the military to move us around. So as we move around, my wife does not pay Alabama taxes on her income that she earns here while we're ordered to be stationed here for the military. She pays Florida taxes, which in our case is none. And so that's another great thing, is a great point there, Spencer, is you really have to both educate yourself and educate those around you sometimes on some of these benefits. Source documents, irs.gov and things like that are going to be better than what your friend said on Facebook. So just keep that in mind too. Do your research and be prepared to present good evidence.
Yeah, one thing I messed up there was it's not $1 million in your Roth IRA. If you do the $6,000 contribution over 40 years at 7%, that ends up being $1.28 million in your Roth IRA. And then based on the 4% rule right there, I mean, you can pull out, what's that going to be, like $50,000? Yeah, $51,000.
Yeah.
You can pull a year off of that money tax-free. You're not paying any taxes on it. So that's and again, like $51,000 tax-free, you would have to earn maybe $60,000 or $70,000 of taxable income to get the same spending ability that $51,000 of tax-free income gets you. So it's real, it's a $1.28 million Roth IRA account, but if you put the same money into your traditional TSP, it would have to be maybe a $1.6 or $1.8 million traditional IRA. So, and the other, we talked about Roth IRA. The other one I want to mention is the Roth TSP. So you have two options with your thrift savings plan. You can contribute to your Roth TSP or your traditional TSP. If you contribute to your traditional TSP with CZTE Pay, the contribution is untaxed and is withdrawn untaxed. So the TSP keeps track of your CZTE contributions to the TSP. But if you contribute your CZTE Pay to your Roth account, then they don't have to keep track of it because it's going to come out untaxed in the end anyways. Again, with the contribution limits in 2022, we're suspecting that they're going to go up to $20,500 a year, plus probably a $6,000 Roth IRA contribution. I mean, if you're deployed in 2022 or 2023, you could probably get over $25,000 of tax-free pay into these Roth accounts. And again, triple tax benefit. It's going to grow untaxed. It's going in untaxed. And then after age 59 and a half, you can pull it back out untaxed.
It almost sounds too good to be true, but it's just one of those military benefits that Congress and the law allow because of how they value deployments. And just because you're not, in a fob in the middle of nowhere in the mountains getting shot at every day doesn't mean you're not entitled to some of these same things. So it's nice to know. It's one of the great benefits. Our pay in general does not compete with civilian sector, but things like this, the SDP tax benefits of CZTE pay, deployment pay, the way BH is not taxed, things like that can kind of help catch us up to our civilian counterparts. So again, invest in the SDP, take advantage of Roth things. We've talked about before how diversifying between Roth and traditional is a decent strategy and is good. But on the deployment, probably not the time to diversify. You probably, in almost all cases, want to go all in with Roth while you're not being taxed on your contributions and take advantage of that triple benefit that you were mentioning a minute ago, Spencer.
One thing that I think military deployments really provide for military service members is an opportunity to start getting ahead. And I know psychologically, that was one of the toughest things for my wife and for myself after I graduated from college. And, I'd gone through a long training pipeline. It took about 2 years. I had a lot of student loan debt. I had over $60,000 of student loan debt. We were paying off the debt. So our net worth was increasing every month because we were paying off our student loans, but we weren't accumulating any income producing assets. So I felt like I was running as fast as I could just to stay in place. We had cut our spending to the bone. We were making 50% more payments every month on our debt than was required. I didn't feel like we were getting ahead at all. And it was tough psychologically, to think like, well, why are we making these extra 50% payments on this debt? Would we enjoy life more if we cut back on the payments a little bit, or if we weren't saving as much? And honestly, at the time, we weren't even saving that much. We were paying off the debt and we were maxing out my Roth IRA. We weren't even contributing to my wife's Roth IRA. But by the time I got to my first deployment, I'd finished my training pipeline. I was a first lieutenant. So it was an O2. I had just promoted at right at the year, at the 24 month, the 2 year mark. And on the pay scale, you get a pay bump when you're a 3 year O2. It was right in the middle of my first deployment where I hit that 3 year mark. I was making O2 pay. It was on a deployment when I finally felt like we were starting to get ahead. So what we did on that deployment was we maxed out the SDP. So we put the full $10,000 into there. I saved up cash, and actually I tapped into our emergency fund a little bit because I could see the goal line. I could see the finish line for the USAA Career Starter Loan. And we talked about that in episode 9 about how to smartly use the USAA Career Starter Loan. But I had $5,600 left on it in the middle of my deployment. And I think it was probably $6,000 in my emergency fund. And we also had the money in the SDP as well. So, we had access to other money. And I just thought, oh man, like this is it. I could knock this off and I could be done with the paying off my USA Career Star loan 2 years early. And it was so liberating. I mean, it was because my payment was $471 a month. And so on the USA Career Star loan. And so by knocking that out, now essentially the rest of my life, I had $500 more a month in my pocket that I got to choose what I got to do, what I wanted to do with that money, whether it was spend it, whether it was invest it, whether it was achieve financial independence. It was awesome. And that was what, that was what my first deployment allowed me to do, was start to not just get ahead on the spreadsheet, but feel like I was getting ahead emotionally and psychologically.
Deployments can be so tough for both the member that's gone and the families back home. So being able to identify the big wins like this, and you might not be able to do it until you're looking back on it, 11 years later in your case or whatever, but try to recognize the benefits that it can bring. I'm definitely not saying go volunteer for all the deployments to make more money, because that's not what matters in life. But if you do have to go, or it's right for you and your family and you choose to go, then recognize there's some things you can do to help set your family up for success. Now, if you're looking at, do I take this deployment that they're asking me if I want to go on, and it's 9 months long, and running the numbers, it's going to allow me to achieve financial independence 22 months earlier, then you have something to weigh. Do I want A or do I want B? And it's not just, is it going to be hard for us to be gone? Of course, it's going to be hard for you to be gone. If you're in any kind of normal family, and by normal, I mean messed up family that loves each other most of the time, or tries to at least, it's going to be tough, but there are huge advantages of it. And I think the financial aspect is definitely one side of it. And there's a whole nother side of the non-financial stuff of a deployment where you can make huge gains as well.
Yeah, that's right. A deployment can be a really great opportunity to grow, not just financially, but in so many other aspects of your life. So I know I had a deployment. It was going to be to Al Udeid in Qatar. It was supposed to be for 6 months. I managed to dodge it by volunteering for that 2-year to Abu Dhabi. But some of my goals that I set for myself before I headed out there was, first of all, like, do your job and do it well. Like you join the military. They're deploying you. Hopefully, they're deploying you for a reason, and you're going to have actual work to do while you're out there. So first and foremost, do your job, and then once that's set and you've got that taken care of, then you can move on to the other goals. But for myself, I found that once I got to the deployment, it took me about a month to kind of get comfortable in my job. And then once I was there, I could focus on some of the other things I wanted to do, some of which were work out 6 times per week. And I primarily just focused on a lot of running and weightlifting. At least in Air Force deployments, we tend to have really nice gyms, but I've been to some pretty remote, Army and Marine bases. And even there, they usually have at least some kind of weight equipment or TRX or something that you can keep your fitness up. And then the other one was eating healthy. So, there's, in the dining halls, there can be a lot of trash food, but just focusing on, vegetables, there's almost always, eggs and chicken and stuff. You can get a lot of protein out of that, and then just water. A lot of the deployed locations are hot, and you gotta stay hydrated, or you're going to get behind on your health. And then also reading at least one book a month. I know some guys who can knock out a book a week, but I'm actually not that person. I usually like to just kind of read slow, take notes, and kind of savor and enjoy the book. So, deployments can be a great time to focus on your physical health, your financial health, and just, when you leave the deployment, you really should, hopefully you should look back and think like, man, like I grew so much richer on that deployment, not just financially, but, through knowledge, through fitness. And, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, you can read blogs. If you have internet out there, and if you don't have internet, then you can go and grab, hardcover books. And if you have a Kindle, you can download, there's the MWR, the DoD military libraries are excellent, and they have so many free books on that Kindle. Mm-hmm. I've been using the Libby app, which I think is replacing the Overdrive app, or is kind of like a complement to the Overdrive app. And it's fantastic. I mean, you can get just millions of books on there and send them straight to your Kindle. And it's a great way to continue to grow your knowledge. So
Yeah, on one deployment, my first one, I guess, I actually doubled up on master's classes during my first master's degree. I took 2 classes at a time because I didn't have, when I wasn't working, when I wasn't flying, I had the opportunity to just do more schoolwork than I would if I was at home with my wife and 1 kid at the time. So even if you're, working 12 hours a day on a deployment, you don't really have anything else to do other than eat, work out, sleep, and then rinse and repeat your 12-hour cycle. Now, obviously, like we said before, some people are going to be in a more remote location where maybe you're at more of a fob spot for a few weeks or a couple months, and then you get to come back to a main base like Kandahar, Bagram, then take advantage of that time to really achieve some of those goals, check in, do all these things like downloading more books or podcasts like we talked about. So even if you don't have the opportunity to do it every day, there's still opportunity to set personal goals that aren't just financially related, for sure, and make yourself better despite the situation, despite the fact that you're gone away from your family and your loved ones. Take something positive away from your time deployed.
One thing I want to mention before we start wrapping up here is a more advanced technique while you're deployed is a traditional IRA to Roth IRA conversion. And you can do that almost tax-free, or actually tax-free up to the standard deduction, and possibly even a little bit above if you have like other tax credits, like a child tax credit or something. And what that allows you to do is if you put money, let's say, like for me, I had the 2 years of tax-free. And one of those years, 2018, the entire year, every single month was a tax-free month because I was technically in a CZTE for that entire time period. So what I did was I made traditional IRA contributions in the years leading up to the deployment because my income and my wife's income was high enough that the traditional IRA made more sense than the Roth IRA. And then in the 2018 time period where my income dropped to zero, according to the IRS, because of the CZTE pay, I converted my traditional IRA to the Roth IRA. I paid my taxes on the conversion, but because I had no taxable income, it was pretty easy to pay the tax. And then anything above the standard deduction was just 10%, the lowest tax bracket. And that allowed me to move money from my traditional IRA to my Roth IRA and pay very little taxes on it. So that's more of an advanced strategy. And I just want to mention it because it was something that no one had really showed me before. And, if you Google traditional IRA or traditional IRA to Roth IRA tax conversion, military deployment, you should see my article pop up there. And I kind of walk you through how to do it. I did it on Vanguard. It was very easy, very minimal taxes. And it enabled me to get, additional $20,000, $30,000 from my traditional IRA to my Roth IRA. And now I'll be able to grow that money for years and then pull it out tax-free in retirement.
That's great. We talked a lot about everything today, from tax-free pay, some allowances like family separation allowance, cutting expenses, pausing your phone bill, pausing your utilities, cutting down on your insurance coverage, things like that. But Spencer, what would you say are kind of the 3 main takeaways that you would have out of all the topics and suggestions we had today for the listeners? And then I'll follow.
Sure. So my 3 main takeaways for the listener is make sure you are maximizing your Roth TSP and your Roth IRA contributions while you're deployed. The triple tax benefit of the Roth contributions from CZTE pay are huge. They can really set you on the road to financial independence much more quickly than your civilian counterparts. So that's number 1. Number 2, reduce your expenses to near zero as possible when you're deployed. Take the time to cut your subscriptions. If you have, a lot of entertainment subscriptions, maybe it's now's the time to kind of call and see what are you actually using and what are you still getting value from, and what are you just paying because you've been paying it for years. So use the opportunity of a deployment to reduce your expenses. And then number 3, boost your income and your knowledge. You should leave the deployment much richer in experiences, knowledge, and financial wealth. And one other thing I'll mention is after deployment, when you get home, take time to decompress. Spend time with your friends and your family and your loved ones. Go travel. Go see a family member, a grandparent or someone that you haven't seen in a long time, and relax. Take the time to decompress before you jump right back into work. And especially for, a lot of people who deploy, they deploy very often. Like if you're in the special forces community, you might be on a 6 months on, 6 months off routine, and you need to take that 6 months that you're home and invest in your family. Because when you leave the military, the military is going to be done with you, and you want your family to still be there for you when the military is done with you. So my 3 takeaways: Roth Tsp, Roth IRA, reduce your expenses and boost your income and your knowledge. And then bonus takeaway is just take some time to decompress when you get back from your deployment.
I think that's really important. I just want to reemphasize the fact that you may see things on your deployment. They make us take the DHAs, what does it stand for? Deployment Health Assessment or whatever. And, for 99% of people deploy, it can seem like a waste of time. And, I'm not considering suicide. I didn't see anything crazy. I'm fine. But in reality, some of your buddies or even you may have had an experience where you need to talk about it, and that's okay too. Please don't miss the opportunity to make yourself fully well after a deployment. If you need to go talk to a military one source counselor or MFLAC or something like that, take the time to do that and get fully recovered. Integration with the family is tough. And, so I can speak from my soft Air Force deployments, even just something as simple as coming back in and parenting again with a child or with multiple children. The spouse was in survival mode while you were gone, and they did the chores, they did the bills, whatever they had to do to pick up the slack while you were gone, and they were doing it alone. They did it in survival mode. You can't come back in day one and just expect everything to be like it was 12 months ago, right? So that reintegration is going to take time, and that's something you should take very, very seriously. Now I will step off my soapbox and I will go to 3 questions I'll leave with the listeners to ponder, because the takeaways you mentioned are so good, I can't top them anyway. So the 3 questions I'll leave you with today are: how much can I do? How far can I go to advance my personal finance journey, to get out of debt or to increase my net worth? Just play with the numbers, make a spreadsheet, run some online calculators. Can I cut my expenses to this and increase my savings rate to this, and see what that does? That goes into question 2, which is: how much will it advance my journey? I think if you take the time to do a little bit of research and do the math and see that, no kidding, if I can cut my expenses, say you're a single person, you can move out of your house or your apartment and just go all in, and your savings rate is 90% on this deployment. Punch that into a quick calculator on Google spreadsheets, because you're hip and don't use Excel anymore. I think you'll be amazed at how far it can advance your journey and accelerate financial independence for you. And then that can kind of be a motivation for you along the way. Third is just, what goals do you have? If you have a deployment coming up, or you're going to deploy soon, try to keep this in mind. What goals, both personal, physically, and financially, do I have? So don't isolate yourself on deployment or when you come back. Talk about it with people you're deploying with. And before you go, set goals, talk about what it's going to be like, both financially, goals, personal goals, and physical fitness, health goals, whatever it may be. So those are 3 questions I'll leave to you to ponder with today.
Thanks, Jamie. Those are great questions. And thank you for listening today. This has been the Military Money Manual podcast with Spencer and Jamie. Hey guys, it's Spencer again. Before I let you go, I want to let you know about my new book. It's called The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, and it's available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book. This is the book I wish someone had handed me on my first day in the military. In this book, I cover the exact money tactics, investing strategies I use on my path to financial independence before age 40. I break down the math of FI, and I explain the exact dollar amounts you need to retire. The book is full of easy-to-apply financial advice specifically for military service members and their families. I cover tax-free deployments, the thrift savings plan, and many more topics only military personnel can relate to. This book was written specifically for you, whether you're active duty, guard, reserve, a military spouse, enlisted, or officer. Both E's and O's will benefit from the lessons in the Military Money Manual. If you're in the Army, Navy, or Air Force ROTC, or if you're a cadet or midshipman at West Point, Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy, this is the perfect book to start your military career with. Again, the book is available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book, an audiobook, ebook, and my personal favorite, the hardcover book. The hardcover book was printed right here at home in the United States of America, and it will look great on your bookshelf. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And remember, podcast listeners can use promo code PODCAST to get a special discount. It's called The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, and it's available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book. Thanks for listening.